Okay, I'm gonna bring up the page. Okay, well, we're starting now the question of if everyone agrees with the opinion of the Mishnah of how we establish walled cities, meaning what we said until now was that the Mishnah teaches that the definition of a walled city is a city that's been walled in the days of Joshua. It means when Joshua conquered the land, any city that was walled in the days of Joshua is defined as a walled city. And therefore, Jerusalem, although it was not walled in the times of the story of Purim, and is not even the wall today, it's not the wall of the proper old city of Jerusalem. So, but it was a walled city in the days of Joshua, and therefore the definition of a city that's walled, and therefore reads the Megillah on the 15th of the month of Adar and celebrates Purim on the 15th, as opposed to an unwalled city that celebrates on the 14th of the month of Adar. Jerusalem is included, and like we're going to learn, it's respect for Jerusalem. That's why the Mishnah, according to the Mishnah, we date it to the day of Jerusalem, the date of Joshua. And any other walled city that's stated in the time of Joshua is considered a walled city. We mentioned the Ran, which is a Rishon, that says that the question is if walled cities outside of Eretz Yisrael are considered walled cities that they would read on the 15th. There is no such city that we know of today. Now the question obviously is going to be Shushan, because Shushan was questionably or certainly not a walled city in the days of Joshua, depending on what opinion. Okay, so the Gemara says now like this, that is just the opinion of the Mishnah, meaning to say the opinion of the rabbis of the Mishnah. But there's other rabbis of the time of the Mishnah that disagree with this idea of defining that when the Megillah, because the Megillah says that walled cities do it on the 15th. So the Mishnah, the Gemara now says like this. Hold on, I'm just trying to monitor. My daughter's arriving. Okay. It says like this: Masnisin to like a haytaina. Our mission doesn't go according to the other rabbi, which says the Tanya we learned. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Omer. Rabbi Shua the son of Karcha says, that the time that walled cities, that what's considered a walled city that they would read on the 15th is only a city that was walled during the time of the story of Achashverosh, meaning when the king was king. That's the definition. And when the story of Purim happened, that's the definition of a walled city. I.e., any city that wasn't walled in the days of Achashverosh is not a walled city, and therefore it's not a city that would be reading on the 15th. So according to Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, the city of Yerushalayim will not read on the 15th. My time did Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. So what's the reasoning of Rabbi Shua ben Karcha that he says that how do we define a walled city is the days, something that was walled in the story of Purim, which means the days of Achashverosh, the king, one of the characters of the story of Purim. Ki Shushan, it has to be like Shushan. Because the reason we read on the 15th is because Shushan celebrated Purim or rested on the 15th. Means the Jewish people had an extra day in the city of Shushan to fight, and therefore they only rested on the 15th. And therefore, so it's all about Shushan. And Shushan was a walled city in the days of Achashverosh. And they read on the 15th. So therefore, that's the date that we established by. We go with when the story happened. And Shushan was a walled city then. And therefore, because Shushan had a special extra day of fighting, and therefore a separate day of resting, which is the following day, the 15th versus the 14th. So that's the definition. And therefore, we read, like Shushan on the 15th, only cities that were walled during the story of Purim. Okay, so he says, we're going to learn, Rabbi Steinsaltz is going to give us some insight here. The question is not about his basic reasoning. Obviously, we know why Rabbi Shua ben Karcha would say that that it's about Achashverosh, because that makes sense. That's the story. Hold on, just letting people in still. Rather, the question is why was it not enacted that the status of each city be determined by its present situation? Meaning the question the Gemara is, hey Shuki, we're Bezam and Bez, I still think to leave you at Bezam and Bez. So we're talking about the second opinion that disagrees with the Mishnah that holds that the walled cities as the walled cities in the times of this, what was walled in the time of Purim, not walled cities that were walled in the times of Joshua. So he says the question, of course, is not why it makes sense that you go with Achashverosh, but the question is, why don't we just determine each city that the status of each city to be determined by its present situation? If it's walled now, then you read on the 15th. If it's not walled now, so then you read on the 14th. A city that is presently walled is a city is a walled city that reads on the 15th, and one that is not presently walled is an unwalled town that reads on the 14th. I mean, I mean, the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Karcha makes more sense than the rabbis, and therefore, so the question of the Gemara is not why we read on the 15th according to Shushan, but why don't we just make it present? Look at a walled city today. Let's say Jerusalem today is a walled city. There's a few cities that are still walled out there in the world, and those should be the cities that read on the 15th. So says the Turi Evan. Indeed, in the Jerusalem Talmud, there's a third Tana, which is Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, who maintains this opinion as the halacha. Means this question that the Turi Evan explains, this is the question of the Talmud, is an opinion that's brought down in the Jerusalem Talmud, which says that the definition of a walled city that reads on the 15th is a city that's presently walled. Again, in today's situation, you guys may be a bit more knowledgeable than me in this question, but if I'm not mistaken, there's very few walled cities today. I mean, Jerusalem is a walled city. Maybe that's about it. Maybe some old cities in Europe, that I'm not familiar with. But okay, in the city of Shushan, also referred to as Susa, is identified with the contemporary Iranian city of Shusha. The palace of Darius the Great was excavated there. Okay, so Darius was Dariavish was the son of Esther, so he lived around those times. Achashverosh, the Moral explains that the homilitic interpretation of the king's name is due to the fact that the Megillah's opening first states, and it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh, without referring to him by his title of king. Means I'm not sure if he's missing something over here, because we haven't explained yet the name Achashverosh. Later, the Gemara is going to explain the name Achashverosh. But he's saying that the reason why we analyze his name is because the fact that the Megillah doesn't call him Melech Achashverosh, but just Achashverosh, doesn't call him King Achashverosh, is to show that there's something about his name specifically. The impression is that the Megillah is indicating that the purpose is not merely to recount historical events, but to demonstrate that even the name of the king is significant for understanding the unfolding of the story. Again, I believe this footnote, maybe in the printed Gemara, it's not even there. I believe this footnote is out of place. Okay. Vitani didam my time. So now the Gemara is going to ask the question like this. We have a disagreement, halachically. I mean, this is a halacha l'maisa disagreement. What cities is defined as a city that's walled that would read on the 15th today? Again, this is a question. It's not a theoretical question. It's halacha l'maisa. Today we celebrate Purim in Jerusalem on the 15th. So what defines a walled city? Okay, so we brought down that the Jerusalem Talmud has whatever's walled today. That's simple enough. But if we have to go back to Joshua, we have to go back to the days of Achashverosh. Now the question is, what's the reasoning for this argument? So the Gemara says this: "V'tani didan my time." What's the reason of the opinion in our Mishnah, of the Tana, the rabbi of our Mishnah, that says that we go after the days of Joshua? So he has Gzer Shava. Now we remember if we remember the rule that we learned in Sanhedrin, which is that a Gzer Shava, there's 13 principles of Torah. We say it every morning before davening, the Yud Gimel Midas HaTorah Nidreshes Ben, the 13 principles of Torah, which the rabbis use to build a lot of the details and understanding of the mitzvahs, so the commandments and the laws, right? And especially the laws, the details, I do the laws, based on different formulas of how we understand, how we compare, etc. One of those is Gzeira Shava. When you have two verses that match, so we could learn one verse from the next verse. Now, one of the rules that we learned in Sanhedrin was that Gzeira Shava is not something you could just put together yourself and say, oh, there's a verse that says this word, a verse that says that word, and therefore we could learn from each other. There has to be a tradition, a Messiah. This is Bechal in Judaism, is a big deal. That a lot of things, when people just say things, there has to be a foundation for it. You can't just say something. What's Minohani Mili, right? The Gemara says, how do we know? So Gzeira Shava, to compare verses, also has to have a tradition going all the way back. So our Mishnah What is the basis that they should say that we base the wall on the cities of of Joshua versus the time of Achashverosh? So he has a Gzeir Shava, Praze. There's a time after the Jewish people and before they entered the land under Moshe. We learned in Bamidbar that at the end of Bamidbar, the Jewish people conquer the east part of the Jordan River. What's today Jordan, a big part of Jordan today, was settled as the Jewish part of Eretz Yisrael on the east side of the river. The 2.5 tribes of Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh lived on the east side of the river, kind of where the Dead Sea is going north towards the Golan Heights. So you have over there they conquered that area, which is the areas of Og, which he was towards the north, what would today be the east part of the Golan Heights. So he says over there, it talks about the cities that he conquered. It says the word Prazi. Prazi again means the open cities. Shuki, trying to ask something? Okay. Siv Hacha, over there it says, over here by the Megillah, Alkeina Yehudim Aprazim, it talks about the cities, the Jews who live in the open cities. Siv Hasim, in the story of when they conquered the east side of the Jordan River, it says, Levadmi Ori Aprazi Harba Mioid, that besides for the walled cities, there was many open cities that were included in what they conquered on the east side of the river. So read that when was that happening? When were we talking about walled and open cities? Was right before the Jewish people entered the land, which is the days of Joshua. Now, obviously, the question is why do we say days of Joshua, not the days of Moshe? Because Moshe, that first of all happened while Moshe was still alive and the leader. Joshua only became the leader once Moshe passed away on the 7th of Adar, and they already went into Eretz Yisrael a little bit more than a month later, right? They entered the land on the 10th of Nisan. But that's Joshua's time. There's commentaries who discuss this question. But either way, it's the times of Joshua. So the reasoning is because the east side of the river, Eretz Yisrael, didn't kick in to being Eretz Yisrael until they conquered the other side. That was also conditional, right? The tribes of Reuven and Gad, who wanted to keep the east side of the river for themselves, their cattle, etc., they conditioned their settling on the east side of the river of them coming and helping conquer the land and settling the land. So only then did it kick in that was part of Eretz Yisrael. So really, although Moshe conquered it, so to say, but it didn't become conquered as a part of Eretz Yisrael until Joshua went into the land. So therefore, we frame it in the time of Yehoshua ben Nun, of Joshua. So Rashi says, Ksiv Hasam, it says over there, when the Jewish people entered the land, Yeshua. So Rashi answers the question. You have to remember something about Rashi. Rashi versus other commentaries writes in short pen. Anytime you see Rashi writing a long Rashi, like we had at the end of Sanhedrin, is because it's very difficult subject, that the only way for Rashi to explain it is by writing to give you more information. Rashi, both in the Chumash and in the Talmud, tries to put everything in as short pen as possible. We see it in Baba Basra, when Rashi passes away, it says Kanmeis Rashi, and his grandson, the Rashbam, takes over. All of a sudden, the commentary becomes huge. Why? Because it's not simple to write something in short pen. So here Rashi just in one little word hints to this idea by saying, in the days of Moshe and Joshua, because Moshe was the time when they conquered the east side of the river. That there was besides the walled cities, there was many unwalled cities in the east part of the Jordan River. So we say like this, just like over there, what was the definition of the unwalled cities and walled cities? Was in the days of Joshua, and the verse says the word praze. He just says that we don't add in the language about the actual walled cities, because it doesn't mention walled cities in the verse. It just mentions the word prazi. Prazi means unwalled cities. And we have the definition of unwalled cities in Purim. And it says prazi, so that's Gzeir Shava. And just like, so when was the times of unwalled cities? Which means there was also walled cities, is because it was in the days of Joshua. Af kami ma'is Yeshua, af prazim amurukan. So what is defined as an unwalled city that would celebrate Purim on the 14th? B'ma'isa Haman, in the days of Haman, b'prazi Yeshua kamar, which is talking about anything that was an unwalled city in the days of Joshua. And that doesn't change the fact, even if it becomes a walled city after the times of Joshua. Joshua is the date that decides if it's the 14th, if it's an unwalled city, or the 15th if it's a walled city. However, presently in Megillah, it's considered an unwalled city with regard to when we read the Megillah. It means we're not going to argue with the fact there's a wall there. It doesn't affect the laws of the Megillah. So the Gemara said we have an argument. Joshua, the rabbis of the Mishnah say that we use Joshua because we have a Gzeira Shava, means we have a rule of the 13 rules of the Torah that to teach us that if we don't know when is considered walled or unwalled, because it's not 100% clear, the Megillah doesn't say only walled cities presently, which means the times of Achashverosh. So therefore we fall back on we have the Gzeira Shava to teach us that the definition of walled and unwalled is the days of Joshua. But still, it's not the logical answer. The logical answer would be about the time of the story. So the Gemara says like this: Bishleim Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. I understand the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. Layamer Katani Didan. To less they prazi. It's very simple. He doesn't have the tradition of this Gzeira Shava. Like I said, you can't just take two words and put it together. So if you have the tradition that these two words are meant to teach each other, and that's a tradition that comes rabbi teacher, all the way back to Moses, so then that's a Gzeira Shava, but he doesn't have that tradition. So therefore he falls back on the logic. But our rabbi, my time why doesn't he say like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha? So obviously the question is because he has the tradition. So Prazi, that's the Gemara's next question. But let's first see Rashi. Prazi like Gamr Gzeira Shava Mirabe. He did not learn like Gamr Gzeira Shava Mirabe. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha doesn't have a tradition from his teacher that this is one of the Gzeira Shavas. This is one of the words that we compare in the verses for a proper Gzeira Shava. Beinadim dan Gzeira Shava miatzma. Again, this is the rule. It's a very important rule, not just in this case, but in Yiddishkeit b'chlal. You can't just decide things. There has to be a Mesorah. The tradition is a very important part of the philosophy and the laws and the system of Judaism. And that's why the Rambam, when he starts Yad the Chazaka, before he puts starts his publication of his Sefer Halachas, he gives us the tradition to show us that everything we're learning now has a basis. But to just decide the two words match, you can't do it miatzma. You can't decide on your own. El'in kain kibla mirabot. You had to have received it as a tradition from your teacher that this is a Gzeira Shava. Otherwise, you can't just match words. And he didn't have a tradition from his teacher. Okay, so the Gemara says, what do you mean my time? And why doesn't the rabbi of the Mishnah, the rabbis, the Tanaim of the Mishnah agree with Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha? That he's like prazi, because he does have a tradition. So obviously that's why he uses it. So halachic or not, this is the question. The question is that now we have a problem. According to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha, it makes sense. Purim happened on the 15th in Shushan. Therefore, they celebrate, meaning that they rested on the 15th because they fought one extra day. And therefore, Shushan was a walled city at the time. And Shushan therefore defines when is a walled city. So that makes sense, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. But according to the rabbis, that it's the days of Joshua. And the Shushan da'avda kaman, like a prazav, like Mukafin. Shushan falls into its own category. Because Shushan is not a walled city in Joshua's times. And Shushan is not, and nevertheless they celebrate on the 15th. In theory, according to the principle, it should be celebrated, on the 14th, because it's an unwalled city in the days of Joshua. But it doesn't. The story happened there. So, I mean, how does it work? Well, who are they doing it according to? I just wanted to go back a second before. It's not so simple about the Gzeira Shava. Just the Gzeira Shava, the problem with the Gzeira Shava in Megillah is that the Megillah is rabbinic. And Gzeira Shava usually only if you're doing verses from the Torah itself, but it's not so simple to use from a daraisa to darabanan. Some rabbis disagree with Rashi to say that it's a proper Gzeira Shava. But either way, the Gemara seems to accept this idea that Rashi is saying that's a proper Gzeira Shava tradition that Tana the Mishnah had from his teacher to learn from the Joshua's times. But the question is now, what about Shushan? Shushan, now, according to tradition, it says like this. He brings down like this. He says like this. The Rashash writes, Sheshama mi Parsi echad. I heard from a Persian person. Doesn't say Persian Jew or Persian not Jew. Asher Shushan hayishana farnischav ra'idisayt. That in the times of the Talmud, seemingly, Shushan was a destroyed city. which it is today. They're just excavating. They said they found the city of Daryavish over there, right? Of Darius. It's possible. So therefore, the question really is that Shushan was a destroyed city in the times of possibly in the times of the Talmud. So that's what the Gemara is asking. Who does Shushan do like? It's not even a wall. It wasn't presently at the time of the Mishnah. It wasn't a walled city, and we don't even find that that Rebbe Rabbeinu Kadesh, the Rebbe that organized the Mishnah, mentions Shushan as its law. So we're saying, so where's Shushan? What's its basis today? So halachic. So this Rashi explains. Ela Shushan the Kaman. If you learn that there's a Gzeir Shava to teach us that only walled cities in the days of Joshua. How are those that are on Shushan doing on the 15th? It wasn't a walled cities in Joshua's time. And we don't know if it was walled in the days of Joshua. We need to say we don't know that it wasn't walled, but we don't know that it was walled. So we see from here clearly that in a suffix, if there's a doubt, because it could be possibly, and more than possibly, most likely, there were many cities that were walled in Joshua's times, especially in the populated areas of the Middle East and other places in Asia Minor. But we don't know. If we don't know for sure, then they have, and the suffix, if there's a doubt, they go on the 14th. And because we don't know if Shushan was a walled city, the Jewish people weren't going east, they were going west, right? We didn't have Jews we went from Egypt around into Eretz Yisrael. We didn't go as far as east as Persia, so we have no clue if it was a walled city in the days of Joshua. And if we don't have a tradition to know, so then what basis do they celebrate Purim on the 15th? He says like this. This indicates that the book of Esther may be interpreted by the way of the hermeneutical rules used in the Torah, such as verbal analogy. This idea is found in the Jerusalem Talmud as well. So he quotes the Ritva that says basically, again, like I said, that because the book of Esther is possibly not usually you wouldn't, it's more rabbinic and you wouldn't be able to do Gezer Shavas from Esther to the Torah or back or vice versa. So the Ritva proves from here that you can. Okay. Amar Rava. V'amar la Kedi. Rava says they heard from Kedi. I'm not sure if Kedi is a person or if Kedi is just a concept. Shani Shushan Havan Aspanes. The obvious answer. It's not so obvious. That because the miracle happened in Shushan, meaning to say that they fought for the 15th and they fought until the 14th and they rested on the 15th. And more than that, Shushan was the story. The whole story happened in Shushan. The Achashverosh was in Shushan. Haman was in Shushan. Esther and Mordechai were in Shushan. In the city over there in Persia, Susa. So therefore, you can't say that Shushan is going to celebrate on the 14th as if it's some unimportant city. It's ground zero of the story of Purim. Okay, so the question is, because there was the miracle. What miracle? Means you could interpret it to me, like I said before, that the story of Purim happened there. But Rashi says no, not that the story of Purim happened there. That there they fought another day. That Esther only asked for the city of Shushan, the fight on the 14th, and therefore they only rested on the 15th, and it happened in Shushan. So if that happened in Shushan, and that's the reason why we celebrate on the 15th. You can't say that Shushan celebrates on the 14th. To kill their enemies, Shnei Yamim, a second day. And therefore, they obviously didn't rest to the 15th. And therefore, because the story happened in Shushan, they rested in Shushan. They possibly only celebrated the first Purim in Shushan on the 15th. So that's how it stayed. Okay. So Rashi basically, again, you could learn to say that the story happened there. Rashi doesn't say that the story happened there. Rashi says because the actual 15th happened there. Meaning to say that in theory, if there was another reason why we celebrate on the 15th, it's not so certain that Shushan would. Rashis and others explain that the miracle was performed there during the battles, and the people celebrate there on the 15th. Others suggest that, like I said, that's what Rashi says, because that's when they celebrated the 15th in Shushan. Others suggest that the central part of Purim miracle, which is the simple understanding of the statement of the Talmud, in other words, all the actions involving Esther and Mordechai took place in Shushan, and it is therefore fitting that it should receive special honor and be treated as a walled city for future generations, Rabbeinu Yonatan and the Turi Evan.
So the other commentaries say that's not just because they rested on the 15th of Shushan, because that's the ground zero of the story. So why and basically what we're learning is that the 15th kind of elevates the holiday. We know in Jewish tradition, the 15th day is a higher day than the 14th day. That's why the 15th is Pesach and Sukkot, right? Because it's the middle of the month. King Solomon's the 15th generation, David's the 14th generation. So there's a more completion. The moon is full and complete on the 15th day. So there's a more of a completion on the 15th day. Therefore, it's an honorable day and it's a more important day. So Purim on the 15th is more honorable than the 14th. If that's the case, if ground zero, if all the action happened in Shushan, it would be befitting to celebrate the 15th on the city of Shushan. So basically what we have now is, we have, according to the Rabbi's Var Mishnah, we have the 14th, which is an unwalled city. We have the 15th in the days of Joshua of walled cities. And then we have Shushan. Although we don't know, and it's unlikely that it was a walled city. We don't know if it was a walled city in Joshua's time, but because that's where it happened, or because that's where they rested, according to Rashi, they also celebrate on the 15th. Okay. In the Megillah, it says 9:28. Let's see if we could bring it up if our computer is working fast enough here. It's always a risk to go to another page. Let's see if we could do it. The verse says like this. Which verse number was it? 28. So the verse in Megillah says like this: when it establishes the holiday, these days will be remembered and done. We mentioned this verse last week. Over there, every generation to celebrate the holiday of Purim. Mishpacha, each family. Medina, we're going to learn Medina usually means country, but in this case it means large city. Ir, a regular city. Large city would be walled city. Ir means an unwalled city. And the Jewish people never, so to say, stopped celebrating this, or will never leave. This is also the source that even on days of Mashiach we're going to celebrate Purim. Okay. So the question is, why does it have to say Medina or Medina? Walled city and walled city. Ir, city and city. The Torah is not repetitive. It should say, therefore, Medina, Ve'ir, city, walled city, and unwalled city celebrates Purim. Why does it have to repeat itself? City and city. Medina, Lachalak. Why is it so the Gemara says this. According to our Mishnah, why do we say Medina, meaning two types of walled cities? Because it's two different times. A walled city that was walled in the days of Achashverosh will still celebrate the 14th, but a walled city in the days of Joshua celebrates in the 15th. So there's two types of walled cities, the two laws, because you could look at a city that's walled in the days of Achashverosh or days in our present time, and they still celebrate on the 14th. So there's different laws. Let's just cut to Rashi again. I think he's putting in the Rashi a little too soon, but let's just do it anyways. Medina, ir v'ir, gabi zechir v'asiyah. Like we said in verse number 28, it says that niskarim v'nasim. That's what Rashi says with regard to remembering and then doing, which is both the reading of the Megillah and the mitzvahs, the holiday mitzvahs. Chsiv hayam ma'el niskarim v'nasim. Medina, kimin haga v'ir kimin haga. So he says the reason why Mordechai and Esther edited into the Megillah the words Medina, Ir ve'ir, walled city and walled city, city and city, is because Kimin Haga, they have different customs. There's different laws in cities and different laws in walled cities. Because like this. There's four types. There's a walled city in the times of Achashverosh, which celebrates the 14th, if it's not walled in the days of Joshua. And there's the walled cities of Joshua, which celebrate on the 15th. There's unwalled cities that in the days of Joshua that celebrate on the 14th. And there's unwalled cities in the days of Joshua, like Shushan, that celebrate on the 15th. So there's four types. Therefore, we say four times. So he says, the Rashba explains that according to the Tana of the Mishnah, the word every family, right? So anyone who paid attention to the verse, it says mishpacha. Why doesn't the Talmud ask about that? Which are expressed in the verse, in the repetitive phrase, every family and family, is used in order to distinguish between villages that read on the 14th and other villages that advance their reading on the day of assembly, or those that are next to the walled city for the purpose of Megillah reading. So here, the Rashba says that Mishpacha Mishpacha is coming to separate where families are kind of divided between 14th, 11th, 12th, and 13th, or we're going to learn soon walled cities, cities that are outside the walled cities that could see the walled cities, and they also read on the 15th. Okay, Medina is a province. In Rabbinic Hebrew, the phrase is also biblical Hebrew, and also in rabbinic Hebrew, and perhaps also in biblical Hebrew, the term Medina means a city, and it seems that in this sense that the word is understood in the midrashic exposition found here in the Gemara. Mean to say that again, Medina over here is province, but province also means that here we're referring to walled cities, not countries. Nami l'chalak ben Shushan l'shari. And also, what do we divide? We're dividing Shushan, which is unwalled in the days of Joshua, to other cities. So therefore, each repetitive makes sense. So according to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha, I understand why the Megillah repeats itself in walled city and walled city, because it makes a difference between a walled city in the days of Joshua, walled cities in the days of Shushan, in the days of Purim, and walled cities that were not walled in the days of Shushan. Why do we have to say city and city? There is no unwalled city that has a separate law. Only according to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha, an unwalled city, which is defined as an unwalled city in the day of Joshua, has a separate law in Shushan. But Shushan is the walled city according to the Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. So why does it repeat itself year over year? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha bishleim Medina l'chalik beimukafim chayim mimeis achashverosh l'shaber kafim mimeis achashverosh. I understand why the Megillah repeats itself, although a person will see a walled city today. The Megillah says Medina to tell you that there's some walled cities that read on the 15th. There has to be a walled city in the days of Joshua, like Shushan. And any unwalled city in the days of Achashverosh, in the days of Achashverosh, is not going to read on the 15th. But why does the Megillah repeat itself year over year? There is no unwalled city in the days of Achashverosh that would read on the 15th. Lamai, harikola prazim shavim, v'kola mukavim shavim. Vein chiluk vein year over year. There's no city. I'm not sure why Rashi says over here v'chol mukavim shavim, the kafim are not shavim. All right, let's see. Omer lach Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha answers, does our Mishnah make sense? Kivan de Islay Prazi Medina Lamali. Why do we need the Megillah to tell us that there's differences between unwalled cities and walled cities, and there's two types of laws? We have a clear Gezer Shava, so that there's no reason for the Megillah to repeat itself. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, here comes the complicated laws. So why does the Torah say, why does the Megillah say, Ir v'ir Medina? According to the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, which Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Krach v'kol ha'samachloi. Any walled city, any city and whatever is near it, v'chol ha'nirei nidin krach. That he says like this, that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi say, that a walled city and all the settlements adjacent to it, and all settlements that can see it, are considered as a walled city, which explains why places in Yerushalayim celebrate on 15th further outside of the Davidic city of David. It's the Davidic city of David actually goes east, and today we're celebrating the 15th. Some places all the way through till Har Nof, depending on which opinion you hold. And this is based on Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says that if it's close or you can see it, it's not the same thing. There's close and you can see it. There's cities that are close that you can't see, and there's cities that you could see that are not close. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Krach v'chol samachloi, v'chol hanir imoy, anything you could see. And this is where the complicated laws come in presently. What is defined and how far do we expand the 15th. And that's where the Gemara goes now presently to go into this question. So basically, Reb Shua Karcha says that the reason why the Megillah repeats itself, Medina, Medina, Ir v'ir, is because there's cities that expand past the walled city, which is if it's close or you could see it. So Rashi says, Reb Shua ben Levi, b'chalak loy ari klal, halachic amar, kol Ir v'ir hasamach l'Medina shteikim ma'isa. Any city that's close to a walled city has the law like it. Nidin kikrach v'karim b'tesvav, you read on the 15th. Hasamach, anything that's close, afagav sheni nira, the Hirashi's medayik, like I said, is something that's close. Let's say in theory, there would be a valley, a city in the valley, or some other way that it would be not visible. That's very close to a walled city, but there's no visibility. But it's close. We'll see what's the definition of close. It's not just a word. There's an exact a distance that's considered close, even if you can't see it. Nira, if you could see it, even if it's not close, you could have a view. For instance, you could be in places like the city Har Nof. Anyone who's familiar with Hebrew, the word Nof is a view. Now you say it's the view is today. I don't know if Har Nof could see the old city of Jerusalem. The old city of Jerusalem is a mountain. You could definitely see it from far. The question is how far you can see. If I stand today, definitely further than the distance we're going to say. For instance, if you go to Ramat Rachel, which is towards Beit Lechem, right, and you go today is called Arnona, you could see the Temple Mount. So you could see from a distance. So that as long as you could see, Rashi says, even if it's further than the space allowed, you would celebrate in the 15th. And again, there's some people that are till today there's an argument on the halacha of how far does the 15th go. There's some people that I know that go according to the opinion that they only take the 15th 100% to like Shuk Machne Yehuda. Okay. A krach is a large city and usually walled. Some maintain that the word derives from the Greek word, I'm not going to even try to pronounce it, karax, which also refers to a place that is fortified with beams. Others suggest, from the word, that it is a Semitic origin, perhaps Assyrian, and that perhaps it was related to the word kerach, or kerak, meaning a circuit or circumference, indicating that the city was surrounded by a wall. Okay. Ad kama, but the question is, what's the distance? What's samuch? Now we're asking the halachic question. What is considered close to a walled city? So the question is, hold on a second. Okay, there's one question. The Rashba asks, not sure why Rabbi Steinzos doesn't bring it down. It's a pretty basic question. Rashi explains, why does it say Medina, Medina? So Rashi says, Rashi kind of said this. Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, we don't divide the words. Rashi kind of puts the words together. Any city that you could see or is close, but the Rashba says, one second, you could say Medina. Medina means what's two walled cities, the actual walled city and something that's close to or has a visual of the walled city. Why does it say Ir v'ir, unwalled city next to unwalled city? Why does it repeat itself there? So the Rashba says an important halacha, this is a halacha, that we say in the Mishnah, that a city, that the villages that are far from a city could read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, is only villages that are far from the city. But just like a walled city, and anywhere around it or has visual, reads on the 15th, so to an unwalled city, all its villages around it that are close and can see don't have the ability to read on 11th, 12th, and 13th. They have to come in on the 14th to read, which is a chiddur, which means a halacha. Rashba says that the Ir v'ir in the Gemara means that the allowance for the villages to read on 11th, 12th, and 13th when they make the travel into the city for the judgment day, etc., for court cases or whatever, what have you, or the market. So that only applies to villages that are at a certain distance away from the city. but a village that's right outside a city, they have to read on the 14th and come in. That's what the Rashba says, la halacha. Again, you have to remember the Rashba was a paisik. You have Chuvas Rashba. So the Gemara says, but now the Gemara says, but what is that distance? Right? If you want to say in the villages or the cities that are in a distance at a certain close proximity to a walled or unwalled city, they have the laws of the unwalled or walled cities. What is that proximity? So Rabbi Yirmi says, and other people say, Rabbi Chia, the son of Abba, says, Kimei Chamtan Litveria, from the city of Chamtan to Tiberias. Okay, which is a meal, which is the distance of a meal. So the Gemara asked the obvious question: why do you have to make it complicated? Just when the Gemara asked the question, what is the distance between in the proximity of a walled city? Just say a meal. If it's a meal, the meal is about I think 1,000 or we'll see in a second 1,000 or 2,000 square feet. It's like a kilometer about. So just say it's about the kilometer and that's it. I mean, why do you have to get complicated? So and say from Chemtan to Tveria. So lema meal. How come Ashvalon this year the meal kama havakim Chemtan to Tveria, because we're not sure how far a meal is. So if you want to know how far a meal is, Chemtan to Tveria is the definition of a meal. Okay, let's see Rashi. How far do we call it close by? Reb Steinsaltz is going to say, like Humtan to Tiberias. Humtan also called Hamat or Hamta. Maybe that's Chomat Geder. Chomat Geder. I was wondering when I did the class, when I prepared the class, what it meant. Is the city that is built around the hot springs of Tiberias. See, the problem is like this. There's two hot springs, right? There's Chomat. People are familiar with the north over here around the Kinneret. There's Chomat Geder, which I believe is on the east side of the Kinneret of the sea, or towards the beginning on the east banks of the sea. I think that's where Chomat Geder is, which is the hot springs on the bottom of the south part of the Golden Heights. And there's also the hot springs that are by Rabbi Meir, which is on the road towards Tiberias. If you're taking the 90 from Tzemach Tzemach, you're driving through the valley, and you go. Let's say if you're going from Jerusalem, you take the Jordan Valley, you hit the Tzemach Tzemach, you go up towards Tiberias around the west side of the Kinneret. You're going to hit the hot springs, and then about a mile away is the city of Tiberias. So I wasn't understanding what Rabbi Steinsaltz says over here, that the city of Humta was the springs of Tiberias. Although it was close to Tiberias, it was separate. It was a separate settlement. Till today, it's not exactly the city. It was also set the seat of one of the priestly watches. Ancient Tiberias was built south of the modern Tiberias, and the distance between ancient Tiberias and Humta was a mil, which is approximately 1,000 to 1,200 meters, which is about a kilometer. Now the thing is like this. I'm not sure why he's saying that, because Tiberias today, let's say Tiberias today, first of all, we have Crusader walls today that are still standing around the city of Tiberias. Tiberias was built, of course, as we're going to see in the next footnote, by Herod in honor of the Emperor Tiberius. So Tiberias is one of the holy cities. There is a wall there, according to some opinions, times Yeshua ben Nun. I'm not sure when he means ancient Tiberias, or if he means the present Tiberias. But if the hot springs are the hot springs that we have today, by Reb Meir, that is about a kilometer from the city of Tiberias. I'm not sure why he has to say that Tiberias of ancient times was south of what's today the city, because then I'm not sure what hot springs he's talking about. Unless he means Chomat Geder, and Chomat Geder, but that would make more sense. If Tiberias was further south, then it would be about a kilometer from Chomat Geder. I think that's what it's called. Okay, what is the city of Tiberias? Herod Antipas founded the city of Tiberias in the year 18 of the current era, and named it after the Roman Emperor Tiberius. The city was initially built on the ruins of a previous settlement. The sages deliberated with regard to the status of the graves that were located in Tiberias, which apparently prevented priests from settling there. Everyone, I think, if you remember clearly, we have the story of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, that when he came out of the cave, I believe he went to the city of Tiberias, and he helped the Kohanim by showing where the bodies were buried, so to say, no pun intended, which apparently prevented priests from settling there, as stated in the Gemara here later. According to most opinions, the city was founded on the ruined settlement of Rakata. Okay. Again, I'm not sure 100% why Reb Steinsaltz says that it's not the ancient Tiberias, because again, today would make perfect sense if the hot springs of Chamta, it means the hot springs of Tiberias, would be approximately about a kilometer to the city. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's as far as my memory serves me right. But I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah. Okay, now we just quoted Rabbi Yirmiyah. So basically, we answered all our questions. Our questions of why do we repeat ourselves? Medina ear over ear is to tell us the laws of the distance between that the cities that are close to a walled city have the laws of the walled city. I just want to because this is a halacha question, although our class is not a halacha class, and we easily could just continue. I just want for a second just bring down the different shitas that are till today. What's the Chazon Ish, which lived right after the war, passed away. To ask this question: what is today considered a walled or non-walled city, or what? Sorry, a close proximity to that. Shitas he says the Rashi and the Rashba and other Rishonim is like this. The question is, what is this mill? Is the mill, which is let's say a kilometer, this kilometer distance that we say? What are we applying it to? Are we applying it to the Samuch or to the Nira? So he says, Shitas Rashi Rashman Od Rishonim, the Shir Mil Damrin and Hanul Idin Samuch Shein Nira. That what is the distance of a kilometer is only for parts that are close but can't see. Based on that, there are plenty of places today that are more than a kilometer away that can't see Jerusalem, unless the definition is you have to knock all the buildings down, and maybe that's preventing the view. But again, Har Nof, or even where I'm sitting right now, if I'm standing on the floor, I can't see the walled city, and I'm not even sure if I'm within a kilometer. Maybe I'm within a kilometer, but the people who say Shukmach in Yehuda is a kilometer, so after Shukmach in Yehuda would be, you would have to celebrate on the 14th, which means biblically, halachically, you can't not listen to the Megillah on the 14th. If you live by, let's say, by areas like by the entrance of the city, or further than that, you would have to celebrate on the 14th. That's a very radical, very few people hold by that. But that's what he's saying. So the Rashi says that the idea of the meal is only samach sheini nira. Alva benira, but if you could see, then there's no distance. If you see Jerusalem, you could be 20 miles away. If you could see Jerusalem for whatever reason, then you do the 15. The cost of a Rash, but last year there's no limit. If you could see the walled city, then as long as you could see it. If you stand today on French Hill, I'm not sure if French Hill is more than a kilometer away, but French Hill you can clearly see. If you go all the way to Talpiot, by the boardwalk over there, you could clearly see the old city. I'm sure it's more than a kilometer away. So because of Rashi, let's say sheer, then there's no limit. Kol shu near, whatever you can see, Karim Tesvav reads in the 15th. The Ritva writes, the kol shu nira, imakrach umishtativ imay binyaneyan, koira b'tesvav. So here, the Ritva makes another definition. As long as it's considered, and this is the opinion that people use today, it's in the municipality question. Where are your taxes paid? What zip code are you in? Who's the mayor of your city? So as long as you are mishtatif in your nehem, you're part of the community of the city, then for instance, if you have a walled city, and so today Jerusalem, this is one mayor with one laws, one municipality, and wherever they're considered the city of Jerusalem, would celebrate on the 15th according to the Ritva. The Ran Kasiv Bepirish Kam Ran gives to it the Beinin Shia Mischashev Betchum Eir B'Ainu Lachor Kiritfas. Seemingly the Ran also writes in its first translation, in its first opinion, like the Ritva, that as long as you're involved in the city, then it's considered a walled city. As Kasiv the Im Racha Kam Parsois Vadid Lav B'Chlal Niruhu. He just says that if you're mamish distant, means to say, for instance, you have to understand something. The halacha question is, Jerusalem today, for political reasons, expanded the borders of Jerusalem almost to I'm not sure if it's almost or even very close to Ma'ale Adumim, right? So because of the question, the political question about the undivided city of Jerusalem that's Jewish, so they expanded the city that's to villages that are quite far from Yerushalayim. According to the Ritva, that would be considered 15th. Why? Because it's in the municipality of the city, but it's really only doing that for political reasons. But that's another question. But he quotes then he says that the Pri Megadim, Pri Chadash, which are more recent, the Gam Besamach Ve'inyan Shiyim Eschasha B'tchum Yir, that it has to be, even if it's close, you can't be close. If you have your own zip code or your own little municipality, then it's not, even if it's close, it reads on the 14th. The Chazanish, which is the most recent Mishrabi of opinions, Kosiv the Samach Leibin Tanai is Zel Dasaran. The Chazanish, which is probably what most people go for, says doesn't make a difference. Even if it's a small village or it's close within a kilometer of a walled city, they would read on the 15th, even if it's a separate municipality. But today, Jerusalem today is a large city, and therefore, based on the Ran and the Ritva, is the reason why, even though you can't see the walled city, and even though it's further than a kilometer away or 1,200 meters away, it still reads on the 15th because it's under the same city. How far does that expand? I don't know. What's going to happen if it continues to go into all the way to Motza and Beit Zayit further down the road? That's another question. Okay, let's just go a little further. This is a connection that's not really connected to at all our Gemara, but we're just bringing down other things of Rabbi Yirmiyah. So it says like this. This is an important question which starts a little bit of Agadata in our Gemara, which is the question of the Mansapach. Mansapach is, I remember there was one of the first, when I was a young boy growing up in Seattle, the rabbi of the Bikur Cholim asked myself and my brother, what's Mansapach? We were young kids running around. He said, hey, come over, he must have been learning Megillah. My brother Alter, right away, he didn't know, but he figured that what's Mansapach? Mem Nun Tzadik Peiches Chof, the 5 letters that are doubled, right? There's Mem and a closed Mem, Nun and a long Nun, Tzadik and a long Tzadik, Fei, Pei and a long Fei, Chof and a long Chof. So the 5 letters that are doubled, how do we know that there's such a thing, right? There's only 5 Hebrew letters that are doubled. What's the foundation? What's the Yisod? What's the marker? Who taught us this? So Tzofim, the seers, meaning the prophets, Amurim told us that. Okay. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says the fact that we have letters in the Hebrew alphabet that are doubled is a Masorah, comes from the seers, the men that see, which are the Tzofim, are the seers. Man Tzapach Kofel Oisis, the letters that are doubled. Tzofim Amurim Nevi Adoris, the prophets of the generations. All right, the seers is more a better interpretation. The Rashba asks, how is it possible that the manner in which these letters are written was forgotten? After all, the Torah scroll written by Moses himself was kept in the temple in the ark and could have been checked at any time. I mean, very simply, you could have opened up the Sefer Torah, which means we're going to learn in a second, that doesn't mean that they instituted it, but they told us this is how it has to be. It means they didn't know how it was supposed to be. So if they didn't know how it was supposed to be, it's a simple solution. Open up a Sefer Torah. And we have a Sefer Torah that Moshe wrote. And it sat in the ark. It sat by the ark in the Holy of Holies. And the high priest could go in there for that reason and take it out and see what it says. And if there's 5 letters that are doubled, it's simple. So he explains that the doubt occurred after King Yehoshua hid the ark, due to the prophecies predicting the destruction of the temple. We know that the king Yeshayahu, which was pretty much the last good king of the Jewish people of the Davidic dynasty in the first temple. So after him was just his sons and grandsons, but they were all corrupt one way or another, and they led to the destruction. He was killed in the fight of Megiddo, which we're going to learn about soon. So the king Yeshayahu, in the height of his rule, he told the priests to hide the ark. That's why till today there's the hysteria, where's the lost ark, right? Question is where he hid it. So it says he hid it in a special place that Shlomo Melech told him to hide it. With it was the Torah. There's a question if the Torah was in the ark or next to the ark. That's a whole machlokes. But the Torah went with, so there was no Torah to check. Following Yeshayahu's reign, wicked kings abolished Torah study, and this led to the doubts about how the letters would be written. And because of Yeridus Adairos, we forgot how we're supposed to read it. So we didn't know. This applies to many times that we've had this in history. Certain questions we didn't know. We didn't know after Moshe died. Certain things we forgot a lot of halachas until it was re-revealed. So, for instance, Ad Hayom, we have the Alter Rebbe is of the opinion that the word Pitzua Daka, which is just talking about the laws of different bodily damages, is the question of the word dakas with an dalit kuf, if it's a dalit kuf, if it's with a hey or an aleph. And the Alter Rebbe was b'tzur dakas with an aleph, and there's others that have it with a hey. So how do we know? So the previous Lubavitch Rebbe went to certain old scrolls to check. Where were the two old scrolls before the war before the World War II that they could check? There was the scroll that Ezra the scribe wrote, and that scroll was kept in the ark of the shul in Prague, the Alten Shul. Shuki, you were in that area last year. So in the Alten Shul, they still till today. They have, I don't know if till today they have that Sefer Torah, but they had then the Sefer Torah written by the Ezra the scribe, and it said, like the Alter Rebbe said, Psudaka, and also with an aleph.
Aleppo, right? Aleppo?
Not Aleppo. No, it's not Aleppo. They checked the Sefer Torah that Ezra wrote that was kept in the ark of the Maral Shul. And the second Torah they have is the Aleppo is from Syria, right?
Yeah, yes.
No, I don't. It could be. I don't know if they checked that as well. And also they had the Aleppo only came out that later after the previous Rebbe passed away. I believe it was they took it out of Syria. And the second what they checked was the Sefer Torah. He checked Sefer Torah written by the Miriam of Rottenburg. Also had a pseudodaka written like that. But until today we have Shilas. The Rambam writes when he checks the Sefer Torahs, he said he checked many Sefer Torahs and he had an old Sefer Torah in Egypt. So we had to have old Sefer Torah, but the letters of Mansapach, the double letters, they forgot, and they couldn't check Moses' Torah because it was hidden by the king Yeshua. Okay, Mansapach, he says the Gaonim write that the letters were intentionally arranged in this order. What's the question of Mansapach? It's not the right order. Why? Because it says Mem is the first letter is 40, right? Nun is 50, Tzadik is 90, Pei is 80. So it should really be Mem Nun Pei Tzadik Chaf. Sorry, Chaf is the first letter. It should be Chaf Mem Nun Pei Tzadik. Why does it say Mem Nun Tzadik Pei Chaf? So the Goinim say the reason we call it Mansapach was intentionally arranged in this order and not in the alphabetic order, in order to allude to the seers who ordained them, which is in the word Mansapach, we have Minatza, we have the word Sofa, which is to see. So the Tzofim, right? So we have the letters like that. So it teaches us that these letters were taught to us by the seers. So I just do a little bit further than Gemara. I think we can finish the page here. It's a long Tosfos, so obviously not going to the Tosfos. But Tisra, the Gemara says, is that the case? Seemingly, the Gemara understood at this point that not that the letters were doubled that were revealed to us by the prophets, but that the letters were initiated by the prophets. That up until the prophets' times, the letters were there was no double letters at all. So how could you say? So now the Gemara says, if that's the case, we learn Eila mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs that are prophet. From this, we learn that a prophet's not allowed al chadish davar miata. From after Moshe, you can't come with new ideas. So how could you have new letters if those letters didn't exist in Moshe's times? Just finish off the question that the mem and samach, the letters mem and samach are closed letters. Meaning to say that the letters of the luchos, of the tablets that came down from Moshe, came down with the letters through and through. So if you engrave a letter that's not through and through, it's not a question, but if you engrave a letter through and through, the obvious question is, how does the circle letter stay, right? Because if you're going to have a circle, like a samach or a mem, they're both circular, so the inside has nothing to hold on if it goes through and through. If you have a letter that has an opening, so the inside could hold on to the opening. But the closed letters, have nothing to hold on to. So when the luchas came down and you saw samach or a mem, slash mem, in the luchas, how is the inside part is staying? So it says, B'nes hayoim, it was a miracle. That was a miraculous. Let's just do the Rashi. Well, what do we see from here? That a closed mem was in the times of Moshe. So how could you say that the prophets instituted the double letters? The closed mem is only a double letter because the regular mem is not closed. It's called a shloss mem, right? We close up the mem. So Raj says, "Benes hayu oimdim shahaisa chikikasan mishtei v'reim." Then the way the luchais, the tablets were written, that they perforated all the way through both sides of the luchais. It went all the way through. Hilkach shara isis eish lehem makim davik. That all other letters have what to hold on to close up the spaces, because it's not a closed letter. Elamem v'samech haisa ba'aver. They had the circular part. Means it was only perforated the round, but in between the round there's the space, right? Like, so how did it hold? The daf gives a stum that only applies to closed letters. Means in theory you could have just asked and said this only proves that the closed mem existed. It doesn't prove about the other four letters. But it's easier just to ask a single question that basically defeats the idea, because Rabbi Yirmiyah says that all five letters were taught by the prophets. Okay, let's just we're going to stop mid of the subject, and we'll circle back to it Be'ezus Hashem next week. Wishing everyone a happy Chanukah. Thank you for joining. I know it's difficult to come out tonight and learn on Chanukah, but I'm happy we all were able to get some learning done. Laila Tov, happy Chanukah. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Happy